Well, evening, folks. Old Buster coming to you again with another story. This is called Denver. Well, Leonard the Crusher Banks fell down right smack dab in front of Hired as he was chasing the rattler slithering away into the scrub out back of the airport in Denver. Now, Leonard was 3 sheets to the wind and snoring real peaceful like when Hired up and ambles over to where he fell down in a hollered out place in the sand. Well, Hired done caught up 2 full-footers by this time and was tying up the tow sack when old Leonard began to fight in the air. When Hired took off his jacket and put it under Leonard's hide, the boy calmed down considerable like. Well, Hired looked Leonard over real good to see if he was hurt bad or just had a snoot full. Sure enough, he seemed to be in good shape and not nary a scratch on the boy except a goose egg on his noggin. About that time, Jesse and Buster walked up and began to ask him what was going on. What done happened to that feller, they asked Hired. Well, Hired told him he sure didn't know, but the feller just walked up and fell right down where he lay. Well, Hired asked the boys where Walter was, and they said he was off with some fellers he met in the parade they had downtown in Denver riding a gray. Said they'd bring him on back about sundown. Well, Buster went on back to the ford and got some water for the feller and figured they had ought to try to get him up. Well, Jesse stood over the feller and to shade him some, shade his old hide, and Buster began to wiping his face with the water. Well, Leonard come to and was batting his eyeballs and rubbing the knot on his hide. He looked up and with such a quizzical look in his face you ever saw, and asked Hired who was Mutt and Jeff. He was talking about Jesse and Buster. Then Leonard seed Hired with the tow sack and muttered something about if and he knowed who thunked him on his aid and left him in the desert. Well, the boys got Leonard up and into Buster's ford and turned on some air, and Leonard got some air on him and refreshed a little bit where he could talk. Buster drove over to a drive-up coffee shop and got some coffee for Leonard, and Hired throwed his tow sack in the back of the ford. Well, after a bit, Leonard began to talk sensible like, and Hired asked Leonard how he come to be in the desert and why he was so snockered like he was. Well, Leonard said he was conked on his hide and left in the desert, and all he had to drink for 2 days was a bottle of old McBrayer he had with him. It was a wonder the quart bottle didn't break when he was rolled out in the car as he was. He sure didn't remember much after he left out the casino, and 2 fellers come up to him and acted like they wanted his autograph. Now, Leonard was a top contender fighting for the world championship in the middleweight division, and his last fight was the one that set him up for the championship. The last thing he remembered was that one of the fellers told him he should have throwed the fight. Leonard woke up out in the High Plains desert with nothing but his bottle of old McBrayer and his boots. The old McBrayer was the only thing that he had to drink, and that's the reason he was drunk. He was raised in them parts and knowed he could make it back to town if he took his time and played it smart. He was sure glad it was summer, but the nights was still right chilly. Buster and the boys drove Leonard back to his place and give him the name of the hotel they was staying at there in town for a couple of days. The hotel was the Brown Palace, and was a treat by the way of Nancy and Mr. Factor for doing so well with Mother Nature's gift of youth that Jesse come up with. That cream was doing right well for all of them, I tell you. Well, the boys headed up that way from Amarillo for a little trip just to get away from it all and spend some time together, since they didn't get much time for that nowadays. Well, the next morning, Leonard called up the boys and asked them if they would like to eat a bite at the Rattlesnake Club and visit for a spell. Well, the boys all agreed to that without thinking twice. Leonard said he'd meet them there at the old Tivoli Brewery building. The place was built in 1859 and had 4 floors and was known far and wide to serve up some real fine victuals that was a sight different from what the boys ever ate. Well, after the boys and Leonard was seated, they got their ice sweet tea and looked over the menu for something good to order. Walter had parked Buster's Ford whilst the rest of them went on in to find Leonard, so he was a bit late, but Buster had done ordered his tea too. Walter sat down, Hired's bag he brung with him that Hired left in the Ford in case he needed his pills he took every day. Well, Hired always toted his bag with him every place he went, and had all manner of whatnots and widgets in it. Buster was at the opposite end of the table when Walter come in, and Hired and Jesse was in the gents when he sat down at the table and put Hired's bag beside his chair. Well, when everybody got settled, Leonard thanked them all for helping him and told them what all happened with his fighting for the title of the middleweight championship of the world. Leonard had come from out of nowhere in the boxing world when he was a fill-in for a fight kind of like the Rocky movie. Now, Leonard was a direct descendant and the great-great-grandson of George Bent, a Cheyenne dog soldier. Leonard showed him a photograph of a dog soldier's sash laid on top of a muslin painting that depicted a Cheyenne dog soldier wearing such a sash in battle. The Dog Soldiers was the most elite Cheyenne military society, similar to the societies of other tribes. Dog soldiers swore never to retreat in battle. The long sash served as the society's insignia and pinned the warrior to the earth during the battle. There was dog soldiers among the Arapahoes and also amongst Kiowa. Headmen of all these tribes wore sashes made of buffalo skin worked with porcupine quills and beadwork. Only paid men and brave men could wear this sash. It's called a dog rope. On one end there's a sharp pin 8 inches long. And in a fight these paid men were supposed to stick this pin in the ground and not run off none. Anyone could pull this pin out and hand it to the owner. At the same time, the person pulling the pin must hit him with a whip to make him leave, said George Bent in one of his letters. Now, George Bent was a Cheyenne dog soldier and the son of William Bent, a white trader, and Owl Woman, a southern Cheyenne. Born in 1843, Bent was raised in both the Cheyenne and white worlds. He received a white man's education and served in the Confederate Army at the beginning of the Civil War. He returned home to Fort Bent and the Southern Cheyenne Village in 1862. Bent was living in Black Kettle's village at Sand Creek when it was attacked on November 29, 1864. Although wounded, Bent made it to a dog soldier encampment 50 miles away. From then on, Bent lived with the Cheyenne and rode with the dog soldiers on the retaliatory raids on white settlements. So Leonard come by it honest not to cut and run. In this here fight, some feller and his henchmen come into his dressing room and told him to throw the fight and they'd give him $50,000. Leonard told them what they could do with their $50,000 in no uncertain terms. Leonard larnated boxing from a feller he knowed in the service and boxed and trained with some pretty tough fellers as Jesse knowed some of them from his boxing days. Well, that's another story too, folks. Anyhow, Leonard whooped the feller he was a boxing in Las Vegas and then come back to Denver where he was from. He done his own managing and set the fight for the title match there in Denver a few days from now. Now this all happened pretty darn fast in Leonard's opinion to be a coincidence, and he reckoned somebody didn't want him in to fight for the crown. About that time Leonard reached down for the bag he brung with him but got Hired's instead of his'n. He was going to show the boys his and Grandpa's dog soldier sash that was handed down to him, but when he reached into the bag, there was the dangest carrying on about he ever did see. Well, Leonard dropped that bag like a hot potato for short. It was Hired's bag that Hired had put in tow sack in with them 2 4-foot rattlers. Well, Hired jumped up and caught up them 2 rattlers like there was nothing to it. Well, Hired done see the glass tank where the restaurant had a display of rattlers for the customers, and after he caught up them 2 rattlers, there was slithering out of the tow sack headed straight for it. Now, if that wasn't a sight to see, I tell you, make a feller scratch his head, like I'm a-doing now. Here old Hired was with them 2 rattlers a-hanging down whilst he was a-holding them up behind the hay, a-walking across that restaurant. Now, every one of the folks there eating sure enough had a bead on him, I tell you. Hired seen folks getting up and moving away as he went for the tank. Now, about that time, the manager come out and Hired told him to open up the lid on the tank. The lid was locked, and when the manager opened it, Hired put both them rattlers in the tank and told the manager he had 2 more for the folks to gawk at, and for free. Lord, that Hired and them critters. Well, all them folks went to clapping, and a few even said a few words to Hired on the way back to the table. The manager come over and told them that whatever they ordered was on the house. All the boys and Leonard thanked him, and everybody went on back to eating and visiting. Whilst Leonard and the boys was a-talking, Leonard invited the boys to be his guest at his boxing match on Saturday, just 2 days away. Well, the boys decided to stay on and go see the fight and help Leonard any way they could. Walter spoke for all the boys and told Leonard they sure did appreciate his invite and would certainly take him up on it. They all agreed the main thing was to see who flung the chunk on keeping Leonard from fighting and who thunked him on the noggin, because they probably would come back to finish the job. Well, after they finished a fine meal with a little fried rattler for appetizer, the boys followed Leonard back to his training site, which was an old warehouse converted to a gym by the local boys club. There was young'uns a-learning to box, some pretty good wannabes, and a few journeyman professional boxers there too. When Leonard come in, everybody greeted him with a howdy or a wave, and a feller named Ike come over and told Leonard that some fellers come by and was asking questions about Leonard. Now they was getting down to it. Them thugs was sure enough on Leonard's trail, and seemed like they was dead set on getting to Leonard and put him out of commission. Well, whilst the boys was there with Leonard, his trainer and a doctor come over and checked him out to see if he was fit for the fight. That old McBrayer saved the day for Leonard, and he done recovered from his little jaunt in the High Plains Desert. His goose egg was about gone, and that wouldn't interfere with the fight neither. The feller Leonard was to fight was a feller from England named Alan Minton. Now, he was a good fighter and an Olympic champion bronze medal winner in the 72 Munich Games. Problem with him though, was he was prone to cuts. Minton had quite a few fights stopped because he was cut up too bad, and not because he got whooped though. Leonard was really looking forward to the match and said if he won, he wouldn't fight any longer but would retire. He just wanted to show folks an Indian could do it just like Jim Thorpe did in his athletic career. The boys visited with Leonard every day at the gym and went to supper over to his house too. Leonard wasn't married but had a girlfriend named Thomasina, a Kiowa Indian princess. And she was a right fine cook and pretty as a picture, I'm telling you. She was 3/4 Kiowa and 1/4 Cheyenne, and they planned to be married up with the money he'd make from the fight and start a business too from his winnings. He had some kind of ID to use the IBM computers that Jesse invested in for the boys. The fellers that come up with something called DOS was Bill Gates and Paul Allen. Leonard was going to go in with them to make a new operating system called Windows. Well, Jesse told Leonard that they would put some money into that too if and they could, and Leonard said he would see to it with Bill and Paul. Well, it come up to fight day, and everything was running pretty smooth like. Leonard was in tip-top shape and raring to go. Alan Minton was in town, and the boys went by to see him spar a few rounds, and Jesse told the boys that the feller was right good, but so was Leonard. It sure would be too close a fight to call, and a tussle it would be, that's for certain. Well, that afternoon, Jesse see 2 fellers a-poking around by the dressing rooms where the fight was to be held at the Ameristar Casino. Jesse just happened to be a-walking by on his way to give Leonard some concoction he come up with to help his hands in the boxing gloves. Well, Jesse hollered at the 2 thugs, and they split up, went in 2 different directions. Well, Jesse followed the one that hated outside and wanted to see where he was going or what he was driving. Now, the other feller went back into the casino and got lost in the crowd. Well, Jesse lost the feller when he jumped into a van and took off. The plate was from Vermont, but Jesse couldn't get the number off of it because it was covered up with mud. Well, Jesse told the rest of the boys and Leonard what all happened, and they said they would be on the lookout for any shenanigans that might be going on, and told Leonard to be right careful too. Well, the fight started at 7 p.m. at the Ameristar Casino and was broadcast on all the sports channels. The bell rang right on time after the announcer introduced the 2 fighters. Now, old Leonard was a-taking it to Minton, and they both was a-trading licks that would fell 'em you. Both them boys could take a lick, and each one of 'em was staggered a bit after one big flurry in the first round. You could tell this was going to be one big slugfest, and not nary one of 'em was going to back down from the other, and I'm telling you. Boy, oh boy, it was toe-to-toe in the second. Leonard had cut Allen Minton with the right hook and followed with the uppercut that sure loosened up a few teeth when he had Minton on the ropes. Then out of nowhere, Leonard began to stumble without being hit and fell to the canvas out cold. The referee stopped the fight and declared Allen Minton the winner. Well, after Leonard come to with the doctor working on him, he was sure upset about not being able to finish the fight. Leonard said he only had a swig or two of water out of the bottle at ringside and spit that out too. Now Leonard was thinking he might have had some problem with the caulk on the hide, and that's why he fell out. Well, whilst all this was going on, Buster got the bottle from ringside and asked the doc if he could have it tested to see if something in the water could have affected Leonard. The doc said he would, and it would be a day or two before he had the results, but he would rush it. Well, Hired Walter was back out to ringside too and spied a piece of paper, a laundry tag really, that was at the edge of the skirt on the ring and had been partially pushed underneath it. Well, Walter got it and read the name of the laundry and told the boys they was on the case now. The boys all agreed to help find out what happened to Leonard and would get right on it the next day. The doc had Leonard to go home and rest, and he would observe him the next day before he released him as fit. Sure enough, the laundry had a clue that had to be followed up on as to who this here feller was. Seemed he was from Las Vegas, and it sure enough looked like this was going to be something to do with gambling, figured the boys. Well, the boys told Leonard they was a-heading for Las Vegas, but would be in touch or be back in a day or two. The boys got in and went to where the feller lived after tracking him down just using simple common sense. Guess the feller figured he didn't have nothing to worry about on that score. The boys seen the feller going into his apartment and decided to have a talk with him about his inactions dealing with Leonard. They was expecting trouble, and Buster was sure enough up for it, I'm telling you. Walter breathing fire too. Well, Jesse knocked on the door and told the feller he was from the city code enforcement department and had to ask him some questions. When the feller opened the door, Buster and Walter grabbed him and swatted him good and tied him up. The feller was fighting mad but couldn't get it loose, and then is when the boys began to question him a bit. At first he wouldn't talk none, but Buster convinced him to spill the beans from a little trick Devane had showed him on the little tussles they had a time or two. The feller said he was working for a gambling outfit out of Las Vegas, and a lot of money was bet on Minton, and they knowed Leonard might not whoop Minton, but could cut him up and stop the fight. That just wasn't going to happen, so they went to work on Leonard. They wanted to put Leonard out of commission. They had another feller lined up to fight, and they had rigged it so they would make a pile of money on the outcome. Well, Buster told the feller that they was going to have the fight ruling overturned and reschedule the fight with no interference as he was going to jail. Hired called the police and also called Mr. Holmes in Washington to let him know what was going on. Mr. Holmes said he would look into it and he would handle the police and go on back to Denver. Well, after the police took Homer Sambino off to jail, the boys left on out. When they got back to Denver, the boys told Leonard what all happened, that his drinking water had been spiked with knockout drops, and that's why he just keeled over. That afternoon, the doc called and confirmed that a drug was in the water and a Mickey Finn had stopped his clock. Well, Jesse took it on his own to see where Allen Minton was and called him up and told him what had happened. Well, Jesse asked him if he wanted to win like that and that the best man had not been determined yet, and would he consider a rematch even if the fight wasn't overturned. Well, Allen Minton's manager said that wasn't going to happen whether the win was overturned by the boxing commission or not. Reckon that says it all. Jesse told the boys and Leonard when he reported what was said in his phone call to Allen Minton. That evening, the boys and Leonard went out for pizza, and as they was getting into Buster's Ford, 4 SUVs come out of nowhere. Well, Buster hit the gas and the chase was on. It was them fellers from Las Vegas, and they wanted to make sure the fight wasn't going to be overturned. so they figured they had to take out Leonard and the boys as well. Now Buster run out of Gates about 32 miles out of town near Castle Rock. The boys and Leonard had just enough time to get up on Castle Rock a ways before them thugs come in behind them. Now Buster had his Remington 12-gauge shotgun and .308 rifle, with Jesse's Makarov 9mm, Hires Glock 40mm, and Walter's 410 snake pistol in the Ford. Their firepower didn't match up with them fellers from Vegas, but would keep them off of them for a spell till help come, they figured. It sure enough was hell's a-poppin' for a while till they run out of ammo. The boys and Leonard done thought their time was up, 'cause there wasn't a police in sight. Leonard and the boys all huddled up a-fixin' to make their last stand when lo and behold Julian appeared amongst them. He said, "Howdy, boys. Seems like you got yourselves in a fine fix here now, don't it?" Buster said, "You can bet your boots on that, and they got blood in their eye, too." But Julian said not to worry none, 'cause if you take a gander out over on the ridge, you'll see old Black Kettle and his dog soldiers painted for war a-sneaking up behind them thugs. Well, sure enough, them thugs was took out one by one till the odds was whittled down some, and then Black Kettle's war whoop could be heard far and wide. The attack come hard and fast, and not nary one of them thugs was left a-standing or breathing for that matter. Well, Julian looked over to Leonard and told him his people and his granddaddy would always be there when he needed them, and then him and all the Indians just disappeared. Wow. Now, Leonard just about dropped his teeth and swallowed his tongue both when all this happened, I tell you. And Walter told him to just hold the line, and they would tell him a tale about all this when things got settled down. Remember folks back on that trip they had there at Crow Creek. Well, after some questions and a phone call to Mr. Holmes, the boys and Leonard was let go and the Ford got gassed up and they went on back to Leonard's place. Now the boys recounted what all happened to them at Crow Creek and told Leonard that there was no explaining some things in this world, but they was sure enough real all right. Now Leonard was sure enough bum-fuzzled, and he had him one of them epiphanies they call it. He was a changed man, that's for sure. Now, after a night's rest, the boys met Leonard at the gym the next day and was about ready to say their goodbyes when Allen Minton walked in. He looked at Leonard and told him there just couldn't be no rematch for the title, but they had a score to settle. If and it was all right by him, they'd settle this once and for all and see who would win. Both them men just had to see who was the better man and know they'd each be tested for their best. Things got set up just about like the fight of the night. Night of the fight, excuse me, folks. Wasn't no TV cameras, though, or reporters neither. Just the boys and the local fellers there at the gym. Now, Allen Minton did bring his people as well, but nobody else was invited. The bell rang and the fight was on, just like a regular fight. It was to be 15 rounds. It was about like they'd left off the night of the title fight in a slugfest. Them two fellers could throw a punch and take a punch too. About the time you figured one of them was done for, he'd come back strong and the other would back off and get his and win. That went on for 15 rounds. At the sound of the bell of the last round, both Leonard and Allen had knots on their heads and dripping blood, but both was still a-standing. There wasn't no stopping the fight for cuts, only a knockout or throwing in the towel. Well, standing there in the middle of the ring, them two men knowed they'd give it their all and was satisfied they'd each fought the best fight of their lives. There just wasn't no more to give, and ain't no quit in 'em. Well, Allen and Leonard shook hands, and Allen told Leonard he sure had all he wanted of him, and Leonard told Allen the same. They both just grinned and hated for the showers and to be doctored some. Well, after dressing, Allen come over to Leonard and handed him an envelope. He told Leonard he deserved half of his winnings, and he just couldn't live with himself if he didn't split it with him. Them two men looked each other dead in the eye as they shook hands with a respect so deep it couldn't be measured, friends for life. They both knowed that they traveled in different circles, and their lives was considerable different, but would always have a bond. Well, Jessie had eased over and called Thomasina at the beginning of the fight, and she watched it from the back of the gym in the office with a bird's eye view and a ringside seat, you might say. When Allen left out, Thomasina come up to Leonard and with her eyes just a-misting. Leonard handed the envelope to Hired and asked him to open it, since he was the one that saved his and bacon for this day to be had. Well, Hired borrowed Walter's buck knife and slid open the envelope real careful like. He took out the check and read the amount to Leonard. $15 million. Well now, Leonard and Thomasina was plumb overwhelmed and overjoyed to boot, and goggle-eyed at all this. Their life was sure going to take a different turn now. As the boys began to leave, Leonard told them all that they always had a friend and a place with him to stay, and don't be strangers neither. He was right proud to have met them all and would forever be grateful for what they done for him. After the trip, the boys would settle in back home. The boys each received a package from Leonard. It was 3 months from when they was out to Denver, and a letter was with each of the packages. Leonard asked that all the boys get together and open their packages at once. Well, Sunday after church, the boys and their folks all got together at Buster's grandma's house for Sunday dinner and to open their packages so everybody could see. By this time, nothing much surprised any of their folks, let alone the boys, so they shared these experiences together. In each package was a handmade dog soldier sash made of buffalo skin worked with porcupine quills and beadwork, just like it was done in the old days. Taped to the pin, and on the end of each sash was a card, and it read, "Hold the line." The boys' motto from now on, hold the line. Y'all have a blessed day. It's old Buster coming to you.